got yourself out of your working class surroundings, and you made the most of it.
He has lived through it all: chart-topping hits, stadium anthems, heartbreak ballads, and yet, through the noise of fame, Rod Stewart never stopped listening. Not just to himself, but to the voices that carved the path before him and alongside him.
They thought I had left rock and roll. I was a traitor to rock and roll because I recorded a disco song.
For more than 5 decades, Stewart has balanced two worlds: the glamour of rock stardom and the intimacy of song. But the secret to that voice lies in the echoes he carried with him, the singers he studied, the ones who made him stop and listen. He never chased perfection. He chased character, a voice with cracks, with weight, with history. Because to Stewart, that's where truth lives. Because for Stewart, a voice was never just sound. It was survival, identity, truth. Singers who lacked that fire weren't simply forgettable. They were betrayers of the spirit itself. And when he names his favorites, it is not nostalgia. It is testimony. Here are the 6 voices Rod Stewart holds above the rest: their songs, their power, and their lasting spell. Number 1, Sam Cooke. Rod Stewart has never hidden his awe for Sam Cooke. Known as the King of Soul, Cooke turned gospel roots into something universal. Songs like "A Change Is Gonna Come" and "Cupid" carried grace and grit at once. And for Stewart, they were proof that a single voice could change the air in a room. Cooke sang with velvet smoothness, yet always with truth, something Stewart would later chase in his own ballads. Cooke's beginnings in gospel with the Soul Stirrers taught him how to lift a congregation with little more than phrasing and timing. When he crossed into pop with "You Send Me," he did not abandon that spirit. He carried it into the mainstream, fusing sacred tone with secular longing. For Stewart, this was a revelation, proof that authenticity could survive even when the stage changed. Stewart often spoke of Cooke's control, how he could glide between intimacy and authority in a single verse. Cooke never oversang, he delivered. That restraint became Stewart's compass, especially in songs like "Tonight's the Night" and "Have I Told You Lately," where emotion sits inside the pauses as much as the words. Sam Cooke once said, "I wanted to sing songs that people lived, not just heard." That philosophy cut deep. Cooke was not just telling stories. He was offering recognition. "A Change Is Gonna Come" became an anthem not only for civil rights, but for survival itself, sung with aching calm rather than fury. Stewart admired that paradox, strength delivered through serenity. Stewart once admitted that when he sang, he imagined the way Cooke leaned into vowels, stretching them until they became feeling itself. That technique appears across Stewart's catalog, from the playful growl of "Hot Legs" to the fragile tenderness of "Reason to Believe." Each was indebted to Cooke's ability to turn a phrase into a moment. Critics note Cooke's legacy rests not just in music, but in independence. He fought for ownership of his masters and control of his publishing, decades ahead of his time. For Stewart, navigating his own path through the machinery of rock and pop, that autonomy was as inspiring as the songs. Sam Cooke once reminded a crowd, "It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come." For Stewart, that line still hovers. Cooke's voice was not just velvet, it was vision. And every time Stewart stepped to the microphone, he carried that vision forward. Number 2, Otis Redding. Few singers carried raw emotion like Otis Redding. From "Try a Little Tenderness" to "Dock of the Bay," his voice was urgency and soul woven together. Stewart often said Redding's phrasing and power were unmatched. To him, Redding was not just a singer, he was a force that showed how vulnerability could sound like strength. Born in Georgia and shaped by gospel, Redding carried church fire into secular music, giving every lyric both ache and defiance. His early Stax recordings, backed by Booker T and the MGs, showed a singer unafraid of grit. "These Arms of Mine" and "Pain in My Heart" revealed his ability to crack open longing until it became collective truth. Stewart heard in that delivery the blueprint for intensity, emotion that did not hide behind polish, but lived in imperfection. Otis Redding once said, "If you want to sing out from the heart. People know when you fake it." That directness resonated deeply with Stewart. Redding's voice did not just decorate melody, it pushed it forward like a tide. In Try a Little Tenderness, he began with almost whispering restraint, then built to a hurricane of soul. For Stewart, this dynamic rise, the control of tension and release, was a masterclass in performance. Redding's story also carried weight in its brevity. His career lasted barely 5 years, cut short by a plane crash in December 1967. Yet in that time, he rewrote soul's vocabulary. Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, recorded just days before his death, blended melancholy with ease, creating a song unlike anything in his catalog. Stewart admired that risk, proof that an artist could change course even at the peak, trusting instinct over expectation. Stewart often noted that Redding's phrasing taught him how to roughen tenderness without losing beauty. You can hear that lesson in Stewart's I'd Rather Go Blind cover, where he lets the gravel in his voice carry heartbreak without sacrificing melody. Redding had shown him that strength was not volume, it was honesty. Otis Redding once declared on stage, "I'm going to give it everything I got tonight, because tomorrow isn't promised." For Stewart, that spirit became unforgettable. Redding did not just sing songs, he lived them in real time, daring the audience to feel as deeply as he did. And that is why Stewart ranks him among the greatest, because Otis Redding proved that soul, at its peak, was nothing less than truth set to rhythm. Number 3, Jackie Wilson. Known as Mr. Excitement, Jackie Wilson embodied the blend of passion and performance. His range and stage presence made him magnetic, and Stewart drew heavily from that energy. Whether in the soaring Lonely Teardrops or the rhythmic Higher and Higher, Wilson showed how a voice could dance, cry, and command all at once. Wilson's career began in the doo-wop era, but his voice could never be contained by style alone. He brought athleticism to singing, vaulting into falsettos, then plunging into gospel-deep resonance. On stage, he paired those vocal fireworks with physical energy, flipping and spinning with a showman's instinct. For Stewart, who built his own career on both sound and spectacle, Wilson was proof that charisma was not separate from voice. It was voice embodied. Jackie Wilson once said, "When I sing, I feel like I'm flying, and I want the audience to feel that too." That freedom electrified Stewart. Watching Wilson, he saw how a singer could make joy contagious, even while singing about heartbreak. In Lonely Teardrops, Wilson turned despair into a cathartic release, pushing pain into the stratosphere. Stewart would later echo that same emotional alchemy in tracks like Do You Think I'm Sexy, songs that carried humor, longing, and abandon in equal measure. But Wilson's artistry was not just athletic, it was technical. His vocal control allowed him to sustain long phrases without losing power, then launch into sudden bursts of intensity. Stewart admired this balance between discipline and spontaneity, recognizing that great performance was equal parts craft and risk. Wilson's influence spread beyond Stewart. He shaped the sound of Motown, paving the way for artists like Marvin Gaye and Michael Jackson. Yet for Stewart, the connection was more personal. Wilson gave him permission to embrace showmanship without apology, to move, to dramatize, to embody the song with every fiber of his being. Jackie Wilson once told an interviewer, "Singing is not enough. You've got to give them your body, your soul, your whole self." It was advice Stewart took to heart. His own stage presence, half swagger, half vulnerability, owes much to Wilson's fearless example. For Stewart, Jackie Wilson remains the ultimate symbol of excitement, a singer who turned every stage into a battleground of joy and fire, and who proved that to truly move people, you had to risk everything in the act of performance. Number 4, Al Jolson. Rod Stewart once named Al Jolson among his deepest inspirations. Though rooted in an earlier era, Jolson's theatrical delivery and emotional intensity carved into Stewart's imagination. Songs like Swanee showed him that storytelling was as vital as melody, that a singer could embody a song rather than just perform it. Jolson came from the vaudeville tradition, where performance was larger than life. He was not content to simply stand and sing. He projected his whole being, often dropping to his knees mid-song, arms outstretched, pulling the audience into his orbit. Stewart, decades later, carried this same instinct, that music was not background, it was spectacle, something to be lived in the moment. Al Jolson once said, "You ain't heard nothing yet." That bold declaration reflected more than confidence. It was his philosophy. Jolson made every performance feel like the beginning of something electric. Stewart admired this refusal to play small. He saw in Jolson a roadmap for how to command a room, not through subtlety, but through surrender to the drama of song. Jolson's influence also lay in his commitment to storytelling. My Mammy or April Showers were more than tunes. They were short plays of longing and joy. Stewart absorbed this lesson early on. In Maggie May or The Killing of Georgie, he was not just singing, he was narrating lives, giving faces to names, weaving drama into melody. Yet Jolson's legacy is complex. His use of blackface, common in his era, casts a shadow today. But even through that controversy, Stewart filtered Jolson's example into something different. Not imitation, but intensity. The idea that singing was theater, a total act of embodiment. For Stewart, what mattered was Jolson's energy, the willingness to risk ridicule in the pursuit of connection. Al Jolson once reflected, "Songs are not just notes, they're feelings dressed in sound." Stewart echoed that sentiment throughout his career. When he leaned into ballads like Sailing, he did so with Jolson's sense of grandeur, not afraid of sentiment, not afraid of big gestures. Because for Stewart, as for Jolson, vulnerability on stage was strength. For Rod Stewart, Al Jolson was not just a relic of history. He was proof that a singer could transcend time, carving emotions into the air with such force that audiences still remember decades later. And in Stewart's theatrical style, the echo of Jolson's voice still lingers. Number 5. Etta James. From At Last to I'd Rather Go Blind, Etta James sang with fire and tenderness in equal measure. For Stewart, her voice carried the ache of lived experience, the cracks and power that made every line feel personal. Her phrasing taught him that imperfection could be beauty, and that soul comes from scars as much as from melody. James began singing in the church, but her career unfolded across genres: rhythm and blues, soul, rock, even jazz. Her versatility showed that a voice could travel without losing its identity. Stewart admired this range. In his own career, he moved from folk rock beginnings to disco anthems and American songbook standards, and James gave him a model for how to cross boundaries without losing authenticity. Etta James once said, "Even when I was down, my voice carried me through." That resilience struck Stewart. He heard in her phrasing not just polish, but survival. In I'd Rather Go Blind, James transformed heartbreak into testimony, raw, trembling, but never weak. Stewart would later cover the song himself, channeling her influence directly, and he admitted that few singers had ever made him feel so exposed. What set James apart was her ability to fuse strength with vulnerability. Her growl carried danger, her falsetto carried fragility, and the interplay made her unforgettable. Stewart absorbed that duality into his own gravelly delivery, where a single line could sway between defiance and ache. Her personal struggles, battles with addiction, years of being overlooked by the industry, gave her voice a gravity no studio could manufacture. For Stewart, this underscored a truth. Greatness comes not in spite of flaws, but because of them. Every rasp in her tone was a reminder that soul is lived, not learned. Etta James once declared, "I sing the way I feel, and sometimes I feel raw." That honesty influenced Stewart's entire philosophy of performance. He too embraced the cracks in his voice, leaning into imperfection as a mark of truth. When he sang Sailing or Have You Ever Seen the Rain, he carried James's lesson. That emotion outweighs technique. For Stewart, Etta James remains the embodiment of unvarnished soul, a singer who bared her scars and transformed them into music that endures. She proved that beauty does not come from smoothness, but from fire, tenderness, and the courage to be both at once. Number 6. Muddy Waters. Rod Stewart always traced rock back to the blues, and for him, Muddy Waters was the heartbeat of it all. With songs like Manish Boy and Hoochie Coochie Man, Waters carried authority in every syllable. Stewart admired that blend of grit and swing, and his own gravelly delivery owes much to Muddy's blueprint of honesty and force. Waters was more than a singer, he was the architect of electric blues. Born in Mississippi, he carried the Delta tradition north to Chicago, plugging the raw emotion of the South into amplifiers that shook city clubs. That sound became the foundation of rock and roll. For Stewart, who grew up in London immersed in rhythm and blues imports, Muddy was a revelation, the primal source that made every British band of the 1960s possible. Muddy Waters once said, "The blues had a baby and they named it rock and roll." That line defined the path Stewart followed. Without Muddy, there would be no Stones, no Faces, and no Rod Stewart standing center stage with a raspy shout. Stewart recognized that what he offered as a singer, a voice weathered, imperfect, but true, was part of a lineage Muddy had laid down decades before. What captivated Stewart was Muddy's combination of toughness and rhythm. His voice growled like a sermon, while his band locked into grooves that felt unstoppable. Songs like Rollin' Stone and Got My Mojo Working carried not just notes, but swagger. Stewart modeled his own phrasing on that feel, learning that a singer did not have to soar to be commanding. Sometimes the power came from anchoring every word in grit. Muddy Waters once told a reporter, "When I sing, I want it to sound like the truth, because that's all a man really has." That philosophy became Stewart's compass. His entire career, from the aching reason to believe to the raucous hot legs, bears Muddy's influence. Songs sung not for perfection, but for impact, for connection, for the lived-in weight of truth. For Stewart, Muddy Waters remains the source of it all. The gravel in his own voice, the swagger in his performances, the refusal to compromise, all of it traces back to Muddy's blueprint. To name him among his favorites was not just respect. It was acknowledgement that every time Stewart opened his mouth to sing, he was carrying forward the very spirit of the blues. Rod Stewart's list is more than admiration. It is a map of his journey, charting the voices that shaped his instincts, his phrasing, his courage to step on stage and let imperfection shine. From Sam Cooke's velvet honesty to Muddy Waters' rugged authority, each singer left a mark that still echoes in Stewart's gravelly tone. These names remind us that music is not made in isolation. Every voice carries traces of the ones that came before. Legacies passed down like secrets, whispers turned into roars. Stewart's choices reveal a truth. To find your sound, you must first recognize the ones who taught you how to listen. For him, these six were not idols, but teachers, proof that art is never static, that every song carries another voice from the past. For us, they remind us that the soul of a song lives in the humanity of its singer. What about you? Which singers do you think Stewart might have added or left aside? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more journeys into music's fiercest legacies.